I want to do a quick overview on how to complete the receipt of funds record. This is OREA Form 635. It's often a point of confusion for people. It is required anytime we receive funds related to a transaction when we're representing the buyer. And so I just wanted to do a quick overview of how to complete that form and hopefully answer some questions and provide you with a resource you can go back to if you get stuck. So basically, the receipt of funds record, a couple things to bear in mind. You have to complete this if you're representing the buyer in a transaction. So if you're representing the seller in a listing and not representing a buyer, you do not have to complete this form. But when you're representing a buyer, either as only representing the buyer, or if you're in multiple representation and the buyer is part of that, you do have to complete this form 635. So top, we'll start at section A here. Pretty straightforward, basic information, transaction property address, and your name, and the date on which you're completing this form. So pretty straightforward there. Section B, information on funds. You'll notice there are several versions or several copies of that section. You could have additional funds supplied, so you could have multiple deposits on this. And if you do, you would just go back and add that to a subsequent section here on the same form. You don't have to necessarily create a separate form for each of those, but that's the purpose of there being multiple boxes there. Anyway, you're just going to indicate the amount of funds that you're receiving, the currency the funds are received in Canadian. We only do deal in Canadian currency for deposits. Bear that in mind. We don't take foreign currency, and we also don't take cash. The date the funds are received, so that date could be different than the date you're completing the form. You'll indicate the type of funds received: check, certified check, bank draft, e-transfer, all options there to select, and the method of receipt. So if somebody's giving you a certified check in person, you're just going to tick off in person. If it's coming to a brokerage electronically as an e-transfer, then you'll tick off that appropriate box. And purpose for the funds, most of the time, it's going to be exactly as their example here: deposit for purchase. We don't have to worry about the bottom for ours because we don't take foreign funds here. Getting down here on section C, this basically says that in order for this form to be complete, you do also have to have form 630. So that's the individual identification record. And most of the time you're going to complete that probably when you're doing your buyer's representation. You don't have to fill it back out. You just need to make sure that copy is available as part of this in order to complete this section of the form. Section D, account related information. This is where most people get stuck. And so I'll just walk you through it and hopefully clear up any of that confusion. D1 just references reference numbers. So where do you get a reference number? Well, you might have somebody want to send funds via wire transfer, and wire transfers are generally going to come with a reference number. If that was the case, you would simply put that reference number in the space provided. If there's no reference number, which is the case for many other types of deposits, then that's going to be left blank. D2, this is also where it gets confusing, talks about an account being affected. And what they're basically saying there is, where did the money originate from? So if you think about it, if you get a bank draft, there is a number on that bank draft, but that is not the individual's account number where they withdrew that money from to purchase the bank draft. That's an account the bank has, or whatever source of the draft provider is. So what we're actually looking for here is the number of the account where the funds originated from. So down here it gives us, we go to account number 1 here, we put in the account number, the name of the account holder, and what type of account that is. If there are more than one account, if you have more than one deposit coming in, or multiple people, maybe it's the buyer and a parent or a spouse that's maybe not on title, or a separate bank account, you would just continue to, you've got up to 5 options there on this one form to complete. So second question, what happens if the buyer refuses? Well, our goal here, or our task at hand, is to try to collect this information, but we cannot compel the buyer to give it to us. So if you have asked the buyer and they refuse, then you're simply going to make a note here: asked buyer on this date who the buyer is, and refuse to provide. That's really meeting our objectives. Now, we can't just skip out and do that for everything. We do have to take reasonable measures, and reasonable measures would be to ask the buyer. But like I said, if they refuse, then that's one way you can complete the form. So section E here is really just some clarifications. We've already touched base on most of these. 2 agents, as I said, when there's 2 agents involved, it's only the buyer's agent that needs to complete this form. If you are representing a buyer and they're supplying a deposit to another brokerage, and that deposit is going to be held in that brokerage's trust account, you can ask the brokerage for information on that account. They don't have to provide that to you. And that is what the second point is saying there. You might not be able to get that information. Reasonable measures, we've just talked about that. We've asked the buyer, can I get your account information for this reason? If they say no, say thank you very much, and you mark down that you asked, client refused. And if multiple accounts are affected, well, we've touched base on that as well. We've got 5 spots here to record. So we're not just looking for the first account, where we need to record information about each of the accounts that are being affected. Where do we find the account number if it is on a check? Well, Canadian checks kind of all follow the same format here. And you can actually see in this example, the account number makes up those last 7 digits that are shown there. But if the check looks a little bit different, you can't identify that account number easily, I would just write down the entire sequence of numbers there. It's going to be part of that sequence, and that way you've made sure you've captured the account as part of it. Okay, hopefully this is helpful. If you have any questions, please do reach out, and we're happy to help you with it. Thanks a lot.